We'll have some others sort of coming in tonight, adding a few more to our prayer list. All right. So Sunday night, this past Sunday was our last night for Sunday night discussion. We have our Awana closing this Sunday. There won't be supper involved. There'll be cake and ice cream, which I was told works for supper sometimes too. So they'll have cake and ice cream. Want to encourage you to come out and just celebrate with the children what they have going on. So that is Sunday night at 6 o'clock out there in the Ministry Center. Men's Fellowship, not this Monday, but next Monday at 7 o'clock in the Ministry Center for that. I have a wedding shower coming up, not this Saturday, but next Saturday. Got a wedding shower coming up. Graduate Sunday, June the 14th is going to be Graduate Sunday. So any of our high schoolers on up through college like to be recognized, please have them sign up on the bulletin board so we know what to say. Any other announcements tonight? Miss Jane's yard sale tomorrow from 8 to 4, and then I think Friday from 8 to 5, and then Saturday I think from 8 to 1 maybe or something like that. So I know the signs say Friday and Saturday, but the yard sale actually starts tomorrow. So they were reusing some signs. So yeah, I imagine if you show up with it and put it out there, she'll take it. So, yeah. She said pray that people buy clothes because there's a lot of clothes out there. Adeline was over there today helping them put out stuff this morning. And she was looking at a dress, and I said, honey, you're supposed to be putting stuff out, not shopping. She goes, yeah, but this dress used to be mine. That's it. It clearly don't fit you anymore, baby. So, but anyway. It's next Monday. Yeah. You're right. Because, no. Did I say that? Let me look. Second Monday of the month. So yeah, the first Monday was the first. So yeah, it'll be this coming Monday. You're exactly right. Yep. It's this Monday, a week from Monday. We're not surprised. I'll remind you Sunday. Okay. All right. Hey, it'll be tomorrow. The Sunday when I announce it. Anybody else? Oh.
I forgot to put this out. Miss Jessica had a great idea for Daniel and his family, Daniel and Frankie's family, if anybody wants to sign up to bring him food anytime this week or anytime ever, or send him a card, a gift card, or anything like that, there's a sign-up sheet. Or basically just call her or me or David, and we will try to get the delivery worked out.
All right.
So, thank you, Miss Jessica. She also makes deliveries on Wednesday nights to shut-ins and all kinds of places, and so they will be getting a meal on Wednesday nights as well.
All right. Anything else by way of announcements? Okay, so anybody remember anything from last week? Last week, we finished up chapter 23 last week. The Jews were what? Were they happy that Lysias pulled Paul out of the trial? They were what?
No, they wanted to get rid of him.
They were so angry, right? That they said if the Romans aren't going to kill him, we'll kill him. So about 40 Jews plus the Sanhedrin come together. They come up with this plan. They told the Sanhedrin, listen, you have Paul brought down for some more questioning, and Paul won't show up to the meeting. We will ambush him and kill him before he gets there. The fact that the Sanhedrin, the religious leaders of that day, the Jewish religious leaders of that day, would even be part of this plot does not say a whole lot for them. But somebody found out about the plot. Who was it? His nephew, Paul's sister's son, and went straight to Paul, who is, like I said, he's in the barracks right now, but it's not really he's not really arrested because they don't have anything to arrest him on. They would basically had him there to sort of protect him, so he would be allowed to receive visitors. So the boy came to Paul and said, listen, I've heard a plot. They're going to kill you when they take you down to this meeting. Paul immediately called over the centurion, said, hey, take this boy to the commander. He's got some news for this commander. He told the commander all of the details for the ambush. The commander told the boy, don't tell anyone else about what you have told me. He knew that if they did, these men would just sort of come up with another plan there. I mentioned last week that even through this non-believing Roman commander, God was still looking after Paul and protecting Paul. So this Roman commander comes up with a plan of his own, right? Paul was going to be well guarded, right? How many soldiers? 200. How many spearmen? 200. 200, right? 200 soldiers, 200 spearmen, and 70 chariots to escort Paul some 65 miles to Caesarea there. So this commander was going to make sure that he was well guarded. They took him to Antipater, which was a Roman stronghold that was a military station there that many people would travel through because, of course, they offered safety there. It was about halfway between there, Jerusalem, and Caesarea. And then after they get there, they send the foot soldiers home, send Paul with the 70 horsemen to Caesarea. Once again, that would have been in a Samarian populated area, a lot of Gentiles, not really worried about the Jews attacking there. So Paul and the 70 horsemen there, they get to Governor Felix, found themselves before Governor Felix. What did Governor Felix ask Paul? He said, Where are you from? Right? And Paul told him that he was from Cilicia, which was one of the Roman provinces there in Tarsus. So Felix understood, okay, I have the authority to judge this, and when the accusers arrived, we will bring Paul before them. Once again, just reminded that through all of these events, God was faithful. Paul. Last week, and he's not here, I think he's out of town tonight, Brother Allen had asked a question about the high priest in Jesus' time, and that was Annas, Annas, was the high priest there. John chapter 18, verses 23 and 24. The chief priest in this story was Ananias, the sort of rough and tough priest there. So two different ones, almost spelled the same way. Brother Allen was thinking there was about 30 years difference between the two high priests, and there was. He was thinking Ananias back there and Ananias here, but so two different high priests, about 30 years difference between those, 25, 30, something like that. So I just wanted to clear that up, right? If we make a mistake, we gotta clear it up best we can, right? So that's me doing that, and I'll clear that up with Brother Allen when he gets back here. So he was correct. Let's begin looking at Felix. Felix was the governor of Judea from approximately AD 52 to AD 59. He rose to power, as many did during that day, through family. He had a brother there. He had political connections. Certainly there was some scheming involved in there, and several marriages. Throughout his life, he had 3 wives, 2 of which were named Drusilla. Not a very appealing name for a lady, Drusilla. That is almost as bad as a wife named Gomer, right? Which we read in the book of Hosea, right? So he had 2 wives. He married 2 wives named Drusilla. The one wife was granddaughter of Anthony and Cleopatra. During Paul's time, during this time here, he was married to Drusilla, the daughter of Herod Agrippa, the king who had James killed and also Peter in prison. God would judge him by death for those things. This is the only wife that we know of Felix that was mentioned in the Bible, is this one that was the daughter of Herod Agrippa. Felix is remembered as a harsh, cruel ruler, governor, especially to the Jews. His improper handling of Jewish and Gentile conflicts led him to being removed from office in AD 59. Now, don't quote me on this. I don't remember exactly, but I think that was Nero, I think. So I was just doing some reading. That was one of the details that I think I remembered. But one of the authors, in studying in preparation for tonight, one of the authors likened Felix, the governor Felix, to Judas. Now listen to this. Judas lived with the Lord about 3 years. Felix had Paul in his palace. Remember, he stayed in the governor's residence there in Caesarea for about 2 years. Judas had many opportunities to speak with Jesus, did he not? They basically lived together, you know what I mean, for those 3 years. Felix had many times, he questioned Paul on many times. We see that in verse 26. Judas betrayed the Son of God for money. Felix was hoping Paul would give him some money. Any other likenesses you could think of before I give you the last one? Judas betrayed Jesus to what? The Jewish authorities, didn't he? Right? Felix feared releasing Paul because of those same authorities. They refused to release him and admit that he was innocent, right? Same thing with Jesus, did they not? All right. Let's continue reading here, verse 24, beginning in verse 1. Now, after 5 days, Ananias, the high priest, came down with the elders and a certain orator named Tertullus. These gave evidence to the governor against Paul. So Paul was there. They left at 9 p.m. and Paul was there pretty much the next day. I mean, they moved quick to get Paul there. But it took these, the high priest, it took these Jewish people about 4 or 5 days to arrange all this and get their people down there to Caesarea. And when he was called upon, Tertullus began his accusation, saying, "See that through you we enjoy great peace." He's speaking to Governor Felix here. He says, "See, through you we enjoy great peace, and prosperity is being brought to this nation by your foresight. We accept it always and in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness. Nevertheless, not to be tedious," in other words, not to be boring, you know what I mean? I've offered you some praise, but I don't want to bore you anymore with my praise any further. "I beg you to hear by your courtesy a few words from us." So Ananias, the high priest, who was a Sadducee, some elders, most likely those from the Sanhedrin there, an orator or a attorney. This would have been their attorney that they hired to sort of try to persecute Paul. So these they all showed up here in Caesarea 5 days later. These key leaders, these elders in the Sanhedrin, most likely saw Paul as a threat to possibly their power. Once again, we see similarities between that and the story of Jesus. They hired Tertullus as their attorney. This was most likely a Hellenistic Jew, once again living outside Jerusalem there, kind of taking in with the influence of the world around them, maybe not holding to all the Jewish traditions and those kind of things. So they hired Tertullus as their attorney. Now they would have certainly hired somebody that knew something about Roman law, right? Right? They were going to a Roman court, right? A Roman trial. They would have wanted somebody that was on their side, a Jew that was on their side, but they also would want somebody that was familiar with the Roman law there. They showed up 5 days later. This would have taken some dedication to sort of line all this up and travel so quickly. I think it's interesting here. They were not content with having Paul out of Jerusalem. They were not content with running Paul off, right? Because at this point, Paul's already been carried out of Jerusalem. But they weren't happy with that. What did they want? They wanted him dead. That's exactly right. So this Tertullus began his court case with a flattering introduction there, which was their custom. What does he say? He says, seeing that we enjoy great peace and prosperity is being brought to this nation by your foresight, we accept it always and in all places, most noble Felix, with all things. He's sort of laying it on thick. You know what I mean? With this, with Governor Felix there. This would have been a common practice in that day to address an official with some flattering words, much like it is today, right? If you want someone to see your side, you know what I mean? If you want them to help you out, you embellish their ego a little bit, and that's exactly what this attorney did. Certainly this attorney must have realized that he had no case, right? So he was going to take advantage of anything that he could. He knew that he had no proof against Paul, so he would need to sort of distort the truth there. Distort the truth. His accusation, we'll talk about that here in just a second. But his accusation against Paul did not involve any actual eyewitnesses. They didn't show up with any eyewitnesses. If you're going to present a case in court, what do you want? You want eyewitnesses. You want some accusers, right, that say, yeah, I saw Paul desecrating the temple there. You want some, but they didn't have those. Why didn't they have those? Because that wasn't what happened, right? Paul was just in the temple, which he told them, as a Jew, I belonged in the temple. I have all right to be in the temple. And they drug him out of the temple and began to beat him. So this attorney has basically 3 charges against Paul. So let's read those beginning in verse 5. He says, "For we have found this man a plague." This attorney says, "We as Jews have found this man a plague, a problem maker, a creator of dissension among all the Jews throughout the world." He's not putting Paul in a very good light, is he? Right? We've got this troublemaker, right? Who has caused trouble throughout the Jewish world, right? In a way, Paul was turning the world upside down. He was turning the Jewish world upside down because he was basically taking a ball and chain to all their beliefs, right? And saying, hey, this is in Old Testament, this is New Testament. You know, this pointed towards that which was coming there. So he says he is a troublemaker throughout all the Jewish world, and he is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even tried to profane, desecrate, vandalize the temple, and we seized him, meaning the Jews. We seized him. He was desecrating the temple, and we seized him and wanted to judge him according to our law. We wanted to judge him according to Jewish law. But the commander, Lysias, came by with great violence and took him out of our hands. We come across this guy Paul, and he was destroying the temple, vandalizing the temple, and we took hold of him. We wanted to bring him up on charges. You know, we wanted to judge him by our law. And this Lysias, this Roman commander, swooped in with all this violence and took him away from us. Right? We know that wasn't the case, right? They drug Paul out of the temple, shut the doors, and began to violently beat him. Lysias rescued Paul from this mob. But the commander Lysias came by with great violence, took him out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come to you. By examining him yourself, you may ascertain all the things of which we accuse him. And the Jews also assented, maintaining that these things were true. So he said, this commander, we were going to judge him, give him a trial, make it, abide by the law. He snatched him away, sent him to you, and said that we had to come down here to get justice, to accuse Paul. So he identified 3 charges against Paul. The first was a violation of Roman law, and we'll talk about this here in just a minute. A violation of Jewish law, and finally a violation of God's law. First, he said that Paul was a troublemaker throughout the empire there, verse 5. This would have been a serious issue with the Romans. If they were going to get Paul put to death by the Romans for breaking the law of the Romans, this would be the one that they could get him on. This would have been a serious issue with the Romans, since Jewish uprising caused problems in the Roman Empire. From reading, I understand that the Romans had difficulty handling affairs of most of the ethnic groups that they sort of overseed, right? The Romans were good at sort of managing themselves, but it was all the other people that they oversaw, that they had dominion over, these other ethnic groups that they had trouble with. And the Jews were one of the lead ones that they had trouble policing. So this Roman, Governor Felix, he's hearing this and he's saying, so this guy's been a troublemaker throughout Rome, causing problems all throughout the world, and if I put him to death, then it's going to make it easier on Roman rule. It's going to make it easier on me. As mentioned before, the Roman officials who could not keep the Jews at peace, who could not oversee or manage those people that they had brought into captivity, and those were looking over those when they couldn't sort of gain order. What happened to those Roman rulers? They were replaced. Thank you. Did you get that off the notes or something? Okay, good. All right. So they were replaced. By replaced, they were put to death or relieved of their duty. If you can't fulfill your responsibilities, then we don't need you there. So Tertullus mentions this serious charge, knowing that it would lead to Felix being concerned. This would have been the only charge that involved Rome. The Jewish law charge, the violation of God's law, Felix would not really cared a whole lot about that. Was Paul a troublemaker? Well, Paul was involved in some riots, right? But what was Paul? He was the victim in those riots. He was the one that was getting beat to death by the mob. And then he stood up there to address the mob. And what did they do? They said to death with him, right? They came at him again to try to put him to death. This attorney here, he spoke with very little detail. Why would he have spoke with very little detail? Because there weren't no details, right? It was all lies. It was all made up. One commentator suggested that if he gave detail, possibly where all these riots, these upbringings took place, then Felix may have had the courts transferred to those cities or those towns. Well, take Paul there and let him be tried there where he caused the problems. But that isn't what they wanted. Secondly, Tertullus, this attorney, presented Paul as the leader of the Nazarenes. Nazarenes would have been sort of a derogatory term for the followers of Jesus. This would have been used of those outside the religion of Judaism. When they said that Paul was a leader of the Nazarenes, this was not a compliment. This was not a compliment. This would have been a term that Governor Felix would have been familiar with, because you don't see that the attorney offered any sort of explanation as to who the Nazarenes were. This attorney was planning to identify all Christians as dangerous to Rome, as radicals, as revolutionaries, like the assassins, and what was the Egyptian, right? The Egyptian. They wanted to relate him to the Egyptian, right? This Egyptian that caused all these troubles in Rome. By misrepresenting Christianity as being violent and dangerous to the Romans, he hoped to further turn the Romans against all Christianity. I remember many years in Bible college, many years ago in Bible college, reading about how many of the Romans were in favor of Christianity. Right? Why would they have been in favor of Christianity? They didn't care about the religious part of it, but Christianity teaches what? Peace. Don't kill somebody. Don't steal from someone. Hey, this is good. We don't care anything about Christ, but this religion of Christianity is a good thing, because it promotes peace in our rule, which, as we mentioned, would have been a big thing. But this attorney was trying to turn the Romans against all Christianity, against all Christians. Thirdly, Tertullus presented Paul as a desecrator of the temple. This was the charge that originally led to Paul's arrest. They lied and made it out to Felix that they had arrested him for desecrating the temple. We found him desecrating the temple, and we went and arrested him. That wasn't the case. If he was going to be desecrating the temple at that point, he'd be pouring blood on the doors because they beat it out of him, right? But they arrested him they said they arrested him for desecrating the temple. At least that was the presentation that this attorney got. We looked at it last week. We know that was not the case. Remember, the Roman commander was the one that actually rescued Paul from the violent mob. But the Jews knew what? They knew if we can get Paul accused of desecrating the temple, then the Romans actually allowed for someone to be put to death for desecrating the temple. So they said, if we can get him accused of this, then this will mean that Felix should put him to death, that we can get Paul put to death, which was their whole primary goal anyway. They only said that he tried to desecrate the temple because, once again, there was no evidence, right? They had no evidence to present that he had desecrated the temple. They distorted the facts to try to make Paul look guilty. And then the last verses right there, verse 9. And the Jews also assented, maintaining that these things were true. So this attorney, Tertullus, has stood up there and presented the facts, right, untruthfully, right, so that they might get Paul put to death. And then all the Jews stood around and said what? We agree, right? This is what happened. They were all liars. They basically said, they agreed to it, said what this guy said is true. They were basically saying, Felix, Paul has done this, and this. We all admit that he's done it. The only thing left for you to do is pass judgment. The only thing left for you to do is just put Paul to death. Case closed. We're done. Let's string him up or whatever they did. Let's just put an end to him. So basically, we've looked at tonight. We've looked at the prosecution's side. Right. Next week we're going to hear Paul's defense of himself. But when you hear about the details and know what we've read previously about what Luke wrote about the incidents there in Luke chapter 23, when you think about this case that has been brought against Paul, what are some words that come to mind? False, yeah. Unfair. Shameful. A mockery. Right. Anything else? Anything else? All right. What? A sham trial. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? All right. Lord willing, next week we will plan on looking at verses 10 through 21. I don't know that we'll get through verse 27, but we'll plan on looking at verses 10 through 21 next week. So if you good students want to read ahead, that's where we'll plan to be. So, all right, let's move into our prayer time.